What's good, y'all? It's your boy Jay here with Unfair Sports. We got a special guest pulling up, our guy, Collin Kennedy. We're going to talk about all kinds of stuff sooner related. We've got the weekend stuff. We've got players he's looking forward to, players he's seen that we got to keep our eyes on, all that jazz here. So we're going to dive into that. But before we get into it, please check out the Autograph app in the description below. You'll see my link, promo code Unfair Sports. The GOAT Tom Brady's giving away an experience to March Madness, and I want you to win. And also invite me as your plus one since I can't participate. But hey, we can all win together, right? But you got to hit up my link in the description below. Hit that up, promo code Unfair Sports. Sign up for the Autograph app. It's dope. It's free. It's now on Android as well as iOS. And you can win all kinds of prizes. And like I said, Tom Brady's giving away stuff. So without further ado, let's chop it up with our guy, Collin Kennedy. What's good, everybody? It's your boy Jay. We've got one of our favorite guests, Collin Kennedy, CK over there from 247, Sooner Illustrated. The man is literally on the road every other day, man. How you been?
Busy, right? I mean, we finally got a break from school visits and all that stuff, getting ready for a really busy weekend as well. So naturally, I'm going to sit down with Jay and talk some ball. Appreciate you having me on again. We've been meaning to do this for a long time. I'm glad we're finally getting it done, especially at this time of year too, right? Visits, track meets, camps, all things of the sort. It's going to be a fun discussion we have here again, and looking forward to it, man. Always love talking ball.
Always, man. We appreciate you making the time to join us. As I mentioned, you're on the road all the time. So you said you were taking a quick trip to Atlanta. Can you please explain how quick a trip to Atlanta is from where you are in Texas? I would like to understand how that's quick.
Spent more than 24 hours in a car, round trip. I believe it was about 12 plus one way, 12 the other. Slept on the couch at a Red Roof Inn that weekend. And obviously the alarm clocks, because of the scheduling, were quite early in the morning. But that's what comes with a quick trip, like you mentioned, out to the Southeast. But we could podcast about that trip for an hour and a half
Yep.
because it was all worth the extreme measures to try and travel out there to that event.
I could totally see that. And so I'm curious. Let's jump into that real quick because I want to know players that you came across that jumped out to you. Give me like one or two, especially at the trip to Atlanta. Who made you say, if Oklahoma lands him, like guys we're after, Oklahoma lands them, it's a game changer.
Isaiah Gibson's the first name that comes to mind, right? He had literally just visited Oklahoma, I believe the weekend prior to Under Armour Atlanta. Had an awesome visit for one of OU's junior days prior to the dead period. He checks in to Under Armour Atlanta, and I'll never forget this because it's some of my favorite stuff that we do in scouting and evaluating prospects. When you're at an event and someone goes, "Who is that?" That to me like gets the adrenaline pumping, right? Because you're like, yeah, I got to see who this someone just shouted about. I'm sitting there with two of our scouting heads, Cooper Patagna and Andrew Ivins. And Andrew Ivins is our director of scout, and he is very calculated, driven, very professional. When he is at an event, he's in the zone. And so I'm sitting next to him and Cooper, two of the best evaluators of talent I've ever been around. And I'm looking around the event, and I hear Andrew Ivins, of all people, go, "Who is that over there?" And I look over, zoom my camera in, and it's Isaiah Gibson. So that tells you game changer. The guy stood out at one of the most truly deep assemblies of 6'5", 280 to 300 pounders I've ever seen, right? Like, we talk so much about how I believe the best player can be found in Texas because of the amount of coaching and development and dedication to the sport. And like these kids in Texas have been training with a wide receivers coach since they were in fifth grade. But the type of athlete that you see in the Southeast is simply different. And Isaiah Gibson to me would be one. I believe he clocked more than like an 85-inch wingspan, something to that effect.
Yep.
Yeah, just freak of nature. And I'm very excited about what Isaiah Gibson can be as a prospect. We just boosted him in the 24/7 Sports rankings. In Oklahoma, you want to talk about game changers. He said that Oklahoma is one of, if not the school he's speaking to the most right now in his recruitment. Now, naturally, he told me that while he's wearing a Georgia jacket and backpack at Under Armour Atlanta.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there staring at him like, but he's an awesome kid, freak of nature talent, and that would be someone who, to me, when you talk about not just the profile of the player, right, an elite defensive end with plus arms and overall frame, a defensive line talent along the lines of scrimmage as you move into the SEC, that's a game changer. And then the other one is just a personal favorite for me, real quick. Jaden Harmon, the linebacker, flies around the field. I've been calling him a heat-seeking missile. He was the very first offer by new defensive coordinator Zach Alley, if you'll remember. This whole recruit Georgia movement being led by Emmett Jones, Zach Alley, Jay Valai, to name a few. Harmon was the very first offer by Alley. And when you turn on his tape, like, it checks out. And watching him run around, just an impressive mover. I like him a lot. Really good kid. And he plays linebacker. And he can maybe even play some cheetah. And so I look at him as a player who would fit what Brent Venables and Zach Alley want to do defensively. They want those types of Southeast linebacker types as they move into the SEC. And the other thing that I've always thought about Jaden Harmon, the considered leader for him is Clemson right now. Who better to sort of replicate whatever success has been had with Jaden Harmon than Brent Venables and the staff at Oklahoma, if they can get Jaden Harmon on campus. And he told me that he's going to try and get to OU a time or two in the spring and into the summer. So those are two quick ones that come to mind for me.
Good stuff. And it's funny you mentioned like size and different, like, of course, everybody saw the Cam Newton video going around of him fighting two dudes, basically. And people don't realize just how ginormous of a human being Cam Newton is and how much he enjoys physical altercations. I mean, as a quarterback, just the dude, he's just massive. And it's funny because when you go to certain places, those, like you said, those guys that just jump out, you're like, okay, wait, who is he? I want to know more about that guy because they're that's that freak of natureness to it, right? When I saw Tyler Guyton the first time, and I looked at him, I was like, yeah, this guy's. Wait, who are you? Like, and how did God create a guy this huge? And being in the South, man, Southeast, yeah, man, at home, that good old soul food cooking be getting them dudes nice and healthy in preparation to play. So, so yeah, you've been traveling coast to coast, hitting up a lot of high schools. I know there's a lot of kids in Texas, and we'll definitely dive into them. But I wanted to jump into a separate topic that kind of jumped out to me was we're seeing a shift in recruiting day, right? You've got signing day. They're moving up early signing day to like the week of conference championship week, which is going to be a really busy week for the coaching staffs, but also looking at adding one in July. That don't make sense to me, right? Now I get it for college basketball because the basketball season starts right afterwards. You know, it's good to have kids sign at that point. I mean, if they're not going to early enroll, but I get, being able to focus on basketball at that point. What sense does it make to have guys sign that early? Is it a way to make it to where you can have them do a bunch of official visits throughout the season? Like, I know, does it make sense to you first off, and what's the logic behind it?
I don't think it makes sense at all. I think the only logical point to it is the fact that we're seeing recruiting timelines consistently moved up these days. And a lot of these kids who now commit in the spring and early summer months, someone's probably looking at that saying, okay, maybe these kids just want to have it signed, sealed, and delivered before their high school season. Maybe their senior year, they want to go all in on the year. And for what it's worth, like, to not completely take away from this concept, I do hear that a lot from recruits across the region of being like, I want to make my commitment early so that I can focus on my high school season, focus on my teammates, focus on this year, my last year of high school ball. And then the other part is obviously like they want to secure their spot. Like they want to sign, make sure that they're not going to be looked over, maybe a late take, make something interesting, or the transfer portal impacts their signing. But the pros are far outweighed by the cons here, right? Like, I thought Andrew Ivins made a really good point the other day on our recruiting show. You think tampering is bad now? Like, wait until you force a ton of elite high school seniors to sign their national letter of intent in August or whatever. And all of a sudden, all these programs just try and get them to dip out of it for the next whatever few months. And that's what's going to happen, because we know that the senior eval season is becoming less and less valuable, but it still carries weight. Like, these players are supposed to be playing their best ball by their senior season. And that's why not only do we wait to make the final rankings until after their senior season and well beyond that, it's why a lot of college programs take that time to see the fullest extent of the version of this player before adding them to their own rosters. And so if you have a ton of these kids signing in August and then they ball out their senior year and maybe they look like a much better player than G5 school X or low P5Y, what do you think's going to happen? No one's going to be in each other's DMs?
Right.
So, and then you're taking so much other stuff into account. Like, you're immediately decreasing the value of the recruit, right? Because of the buildup that takes place through their senior season, whatever that looks like. The name, image, and likeness value, their spot within these classes, right? Like, okay, this is someone we cannot get rid of. We have to land. These battles that formulate, what does that then do to the value of the recruit? That all gets taken away if they're signed. Now, again, it's important to consider. In theory, it actually doesn't fully, because the national letter of intent these days is kind of fraudulent.
Yeah.
But it's just going to be a few more hoops to jump through. And just in general, I think the concept of a summer signing day, like, it sounds great because you're like, let's give these kids one less thing to worry about so they can focus on their friends and their coaches at the high school level. And it's like, do you really think that's going to happen when they've signed with a school and all of a sudden SEC school X or Y is in their DMs because all of a sudden they're playing really well in their senior year? So I don't really like the concept at all, and I really don't see it becoming a realistic option for the recruiting calendar either.
And your pros and cons make sense, like the comparison there, because look, that isn't that like the point of the Brent Venables / Dabo Sweeney policy of once you commit, you're done doing your visits. I mean, to me, if that if we allowed that type of, I guess you could say, regulation or restriction, that once you decide to verbally commit to a school, you're no longer allowed to make any type of visits, that kind of eliminates some of that, right? Because that's, like you said, no matter what, tampering is going to happen. I mean, there's so many ways you can do it with social media, and just the fact that I can go talk to one of his teammates, sign the teammate, and have the teammate work on them at school for me. It's no different, right? Players are not gonna stop being friends, and they're not gonna stop communicating with each other, especially as they meet each other at all of these camps. That's really where your tampering happens. Kids meet each other at these camps, they make friends. Like, hey man, it'd be cooler if we played together because we'd be an unstoppable force. So yeah, you're gonna deal with that. That's the game. And so, but yeah, on top of that, the transfer portal piece, which I always thought was fascinating, and it's fascinating and disappointing in two ways. One, transfer portal itself, if we're going to continue to label them as student athletes, and I throw the quotes up for a reason, we have to align the transfer portal during school time, right? They got to finish their studies, make sure they actually get the grades, and be eligible to transfer to another school academically. It has to be in those windows. So the more college football games we keep throwing on the slate with the playoffs and the championship, hell, next year's championship game is going to be on MLK Day on January 20th next year. Schools are going to be starting the next day. How do you transfer from a national championship team if you start school the day after the game? The windows can't work. It's damn near impossible to figure it out. Like, because everybody wants their kids in for spring. I think if anything, the one way of fixing that, there's only one way of doing it, especially if your national championship winning coach leaves and it opens that 30-day window. Anyway, you probably should only have a window. You should not allow transfers to happen until after the spring semester. Can't let anybody have that early advantage. That's honestly seems like the only way it will work. personally.
The transfer portal stuff gets so tricky because we have now
Mm-hmm.
literally seen high value players not able to transfer, literally just for simple stuff like academics. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, like there are a couple quarterback examples as it relates to the SEC and the Big 12. Big name dudes who could not move because they couldn't figure it out academically. And further scale, I mean, Oklahoma is one that how much did I have to report on the fact that the academic deadline for class enrollment is coming up, and I don't know if they can take this kid and things like that. It's
Mm-hmm.
the portal is a whole other world because in recruiting, you're really just kind of talking about a kid's decision. Like
Yep.
he can make a decision really whenever he wants. It's just how difficult are you going to make that logistically? In the portal, this is also fresh and difficult to sort of outline because you're dealing with not just the academic calendar, but like I reported a couple times, like you got to think about leases and the moving logistics, the costs, and the distance from home, and then what about injury recovery and the rehab and that goes into the facility location and things of that nature, doctors, all this different stuff. It's hard. I mean, it's something we just don't have a firm grasp on how to execute properly as it relates to getting these kids to the places that they want to or need to go. And then on top of that, you obviously have the giant cloud out there amongst it all, which is the steadily crumbling NCAA, which at any point in anything I just mentioned to you could just be like, we don't want you to play anymore. And so I don't know what the exact formula is for the portal right now. I'm a firm believer in admitting when you don't know the facts or figures to something and you don't have a resolution. I don't. I just because there's so again, like for an average college kid transferring schools, it's hard. And now we're talking about transfers for guys who are worth sometimes millions of dollars. And if they have an apartment lease that lasts a few more months and they're already enrolled in classes and oh by the way they have an ACL tear or whatever else, how are you going to get it done? So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's something we'll hopefully figure out soon in this sport, but it's something that definitely has to be addressed, especially the more that what we just talked about, recruiting calendar dates, tie into the portal dates more and more along the way. Because this is the last thing I'll say on it. You know, you talked about the kids talking to other recruits and national letters of intent becoming fraudulent. We have literally seen guys have to enter the transfer portal, even though they're not even in college yet, because they signed their NLI. I believe Julian Sane was a prime example of this. He had to go in the portal, even though he literally was barely even at Alabama. If you really think about it, you force a kid to sign in August, and then the tampering that will inevitably go on from August to December. By the way, we passed a rule last year, folks, if you'll remember, unlimited official visits for these kids. They can take as many as a school will say yes to. So you're taking that away from them in the middle of a season. Now you're talking about kids signing a national letter of intent, then making a secondary decision based off of strictly word of mouth, right? Because they can't take those visits, they're committed. So then let's say that they decide to get out of their national letter of intent and go through the word of whatever they're hearing from kid or coach in the DM or what have you. They make that decision. They go there through the portal, and then they get there and they're like, oh, I just realized I never visited this place. Maybe I need to get back in the portal. And the kid's not even a freshman yet, folks. Like, this is where we're headed. And this is why, again, the portal stuff is really, really important to get nailed down because this is all going to continue to tie together, especially if some of this stuff happens that we're talking about. And it's going to cause even more chaos if you don't get it right.
Yep, no, you're right. And I have a few ideas to fix it, and I'll have to put together a video on that one because that'd be fun because, yeah, it's a big cluster and there's a lot of details that a lot of the common man does not know, in which, like you said, I can admit that I have no clue what truly goes down, but at the same time, may have some ideas to fix it. So, okay, let's talk about this weekend, right? We got Collin Kennedy here from 247 Sooners Illustrated. The man is literally everywhere. Hardest working dude in the industry. I promise you that. And I will definitely put money down the table in that assessment. And this weekend, the Sooners have the Future Freaks, right? So you've got I know you put out your list this morning on Sooner Illustrated. Go subscribe. You can go check that out. See the full list of players coming through. And I was looking through I've seen some of the social media posts, and I'm just kind of curious on that for the juniors becoming seniors that it can be part of the 25 class. Who on there makes you say Oklahoma's got to have a great showing this weekend to get them signed, or at least get them out for the June? What's that? The barbecue that they do in June as well as in July. Who?
Yeah,
Give me a couple guys that jump out.
I'll throw two names out there because there is a third one that is being floated right now that I put in the updated list. For context, folks, like I usually put in an initial visitors list that I'm able to collect, and then usually the day before, the night before, I'll put in an updated list. And just this morning, I added well over double-digit names. And so there's a 2025 on this list who's being floated my direction that I don't have fully confirmed, but Oklahoma is at least considering and expecting a potential visit this weekend. But kind of the two that jump out to me who have long been known to be arriving this weekend, Marion Robinson and Trent Wilson, right? And we're talking about a couple of players on the defensive side of the ball. I'll start with Trent because I think to me he's the one that really makes a lot of sense as it relates to your specific question. Because what you asked me was, who does OU need to kill it with in the 2025 class to even at least try and get them back for an official, let alone some sort of commitment?
Yep.
I look at Trent Wilson right now and I say, if this visit doesn't go well, are you even seeing this kid back in Norman again? You know, and for people who don't know, Trent Wilson, a lot of Penn State smoke there for a while. He's a big time Big Ten kind of kid, plays defensive tackle, and you know all the familiar faces out there, kind of in the Midwest to the East Coast, are going to be involved with him. And here's Oklahoma out in the very true South Central region, somehow trying to punch it out with the Penn States, who usually try and end up getting these kids.
Yep.
And I think the other part of this equation, too, and why it's so important as it relates to your question, defensive tackle for Oklahoma in 2025 is the most fascinating position group of it all, in my opinion. Why is that? Outside of Kamori Moore, who are they going to get? Who are you 100% sold on their landing right now? I don't know if there's a single other one. You know,
there isn't.
And like another example of this, he isn't on this list, but Cole Breeler. There are a lot of big-name Big Ten programs involved with Cole Breeler pretty heavily. You're 100% convincing me today that he's an Oklahoma Sooner. No.
There's so much smoke there, but I still don't. There's nothing about that makes me feel confident. It's him and Landon Rink are the two that I'm hearing the most smoke on, and I'm not confident on either. I'm not confident on Landon because dude's a Texas legacy. I mean, we saw that with Colton Vasek. Now, it could be a completely different situation since Bo Davis bounced, and it seems like that Texas D-line recruiting is in flux because Bo left to go to LSU, in which they got Dominic McKinley because of it. And makes sense. But at the same time, like you said, my confidence level is I'll believe it when I see it type deal. Right?
And that's what it kind of looks like for Trent Wilson right now. And so this is a really big visit when you talk about the state of that recruitment, the position, when we talk about premium positions as it relates to the move to the SEC or just football in general. I mean, he's an interior defensive lineman that you're going after in a recruiting region that's hard to go to bat in. And so him arriving on campus this weekend to me is huge. Then you look at Marion Robinson. This to me is the other safety that Oklahoma really wants in the class. And if you missed it, if you're a VIP subscriber at Sooners Illustrated, you know exactly what I'm going to bring up. I literally went position by position. I'm talking like preferred walk-ons and kickers all the way to five-star safeties and was like, here's what the board's kind of looking like right now for Oklahoma. And Marion Robinson when I mentioned in the safety portion of the series, I really don't see Oklahoma taking a ton of safeties in this cycle because, as we know, scholarships are tight as things currently stand. Not to say that can't change, but right now, like, OU probably is taking roughly 2 safeties.
And that makes sense.
Amarion Robinson, probably a prime candidate to be one, alongside maybe another name a lot of folks really know. And so, Amarion Robinson, him getting into town, also securing an official visit already. This to me kind of looks like the last 2 dominoes to fall before you get the result you want if you're Oklahoma staff. And look, it's no secret. Maybe the 2 states in America, maybe the 2 states in America where there's most pressure to commit to the in-state school, Louisiana, LSU, and Arkansas with the Razorbacks. Folks who have followed my coverage for a long time know I go out to Little Rock, Arkansas, and I meet with like 150 Arkansas recruits basically every year, sometimes twice a year. And I'm here to tell you, every time I go out there, all I see, Razorback t-shirts.
Yep.
It's hard to pull from the state of Arkansas, man. And right now, OU is positioned to potentially pull a Amarion Robinson from Arkansas. Kind of the last effort that has to go into that concept takes place this upcoming weekend whenever he arrives. And so I'm keeping a close eye on the defensive back out of Parkview Magnet High School out there.
Yeah. And because there's another one out there with a Marcus Wembley that's also an Arkansas kid that's supposedly looking to trend very much in the Oklahoma direction, which you laid it out perfectly. Those 2 states are, there's no other schools that exist in those states, basically, in the way that the dynamics is set. And it's funny because, I mean, Tulane's in New Orleans, but no, literally, LSU has Mardi Gras colors. It's like a voodoo thing that's going on there, and they just suck every single human into Baton Rouge some magical way. Same thing with Arkansas. I spent a lot of time in Little Rock as well, and all you see is Wupig in every single part of the state. So yeah. No, it's you don't pull people out of there. They really harp on keeping in-state talent in state. It's not like here at Oklahoma, we got Oklahoma State split up. You got 2 schools to really fight with. Texas A&M really are your big ones to fight. No, you're right. And so us having an opportunity to snatch potentially 2 safeties out of Arkansas, it's fascinating, especially like you said, we're not this class. It doesn't make sense to take multiple safeties, right? Our room safety wise is pretty stacked, and it's stacked for a few years, right? We've only got, I mean, Peyton Bowling's a sophomore coming in, and then you've got all these freshmen that are walking in the door from Powers, Michael Patterson McDonald, Jaden Hardy, and you still got Robert Spears Jennings, who's still young. That safety room is pretty stacked. So yeah, we're not going to have enough space. And we'll talk about this at the end about Brent Venables and this entire refresh that he's done, which has been fucking fascinating. Excuse my French. It's been fascinating how he's been able to go through and really completely get rid of. He's cleaned up that entire team from players from the old regime. But I digress. Let's talk Beatonbow. I want to talk about everybody's hate for the man. I had to put out a video after I saw the Ty Haywood prediction go in from the Texas guy. You know, it's always interesting when you see the competition put out their predictions. It feels like not only are they throwing in the white flag, but at the same time they want to be one of the first people to ruin the opportunity of a kid because they ain't coming to their school. But we got to see Ryan Foj, who committed earlier of February 4th. He dropped his commitment. He was a 3-star and not rated in a lot of places, right? And so, of course, the comment section on my YouTube was pretty ridiculous. Why are we going after players we ain't getting good players? Beatonbow needs to be fired. I was hearing it all. This dude just jumped up on 3 ratings, jumped in like the top 150. He's number 80 on 247. Ryan Foj. And I know you have a relationship with the kid. Talk to me. What do the people need to know about him, and why should we be excited about him coming down the line?
OU was his first ever offer. The first one.
Crazy.
And
crazy.
I think there's so many ways I could take this. Here's where I'm going to start. If you're someone who complains about rankings, 10 times out of 10, I will say, probably 9.5, you don't even know what you're upset about. You have no clue. A lot of that, as it relates to Foj, though, he was a 3-star kid. By the way, he was the highest grade of a 3-star at an 89 overall. What does that mean? Oh, at that time, his first grade was basically saying, like, this dude's probably a day 3 NFL draft pick right now, and we still need to get more stuff on him. But what people don't understand is that, especially at 24/7, the last thing you want to do to a kid is have a significant drop in the rankings because you were wrong or things aren't panning out. And so what do you do naturally, especially as these kids get on the radar earlier and earlier? We're not assigning 5 stars to sophomores. Like, that doesn't happen. In a similar sense, you're going to start a kid out with a little bit of a lower baseline and try to naturally elevate him almost as like a reward for panning out into the player that he can be and can continue to become. Foj is a classic example of that. And when I went out to Bridgeland High to see both him and Jonte Newman, who they're the pair of offensive tackles there, I pulled up. Jonte Newman was the markedly higher ranked player. Foj, I believe, still was working to earn that initial grade. And again, it's a very delicate, careful process. So it was this part of the year where eyeballs are on him to get that ranking. And I'll just tell you this. I'm watching Bridgeland take the field. They get the ball first. And I'm like, Jonte looks really good. Foj looks solid. My first time seeing him in person. Let me watch this kid first. Like, I can watch Jonte all day. And it sounds corny to say it, but his first pass set, I was like, whoa. Like, and it's in some of the evaluations, folks. You can go and read it 24/7. The way that this kid pass protects as a junior, who this past year was his first year of varsity football, guys. You want him to be a 5-star? He just finished his first year of varsity football. And now he's top 80 nationally. And I'm telling you, man, like, I watched that first pass set from him, and I was like, this kid could be nuts. And I couldn't stop watching him the rest of the game. Wildly advanced for his age as it relates to a pass protector. And keep in mind, he's playing right tackle because Jonte's playing the left side. He is outstanding, not just from an actual technical execution perspective. Fires out of his stance, hardly ever oversets, though. He's always kind of set into that half-man position, which puts pass rushers in a really difficult position. Long arms. And I love his base. I think that he is someone who, believe it, like the 270, 280 pound range right now. Like, this kid's going to look a really good 300 plus pounds, right? And that's what you want. And so Foj is someone who, I mean, we talked about it on the board. I don't even know how many times. He was going to go up. It was just about getting more data and tape as it relates to the kid. And now he's at number 80. And I'm telling you right now, he's probably not done rising either, which is a testament at the end of it, to go back to the very first portion of this conversation, Bill Beatonbow's early evaluation of Ryan Foj at an OU camp over the summer and pulling the trigger on that kid before anyone else, because now he claims literally one of the top offensive linemen in the country, well into the top 100 of overall players in general in the 2025 cycle.
Yeah, he seen him at camp. He recognized talent. And that's the thing I try to preach to a lot of people is that, of course, the way Beatonbow is recruiting today compared to what he did for the last regime and then right before that last regime, that's like two different ways of recruiting. It's the way Beatonbow's supposed to recruit, the last regime, and now the way Beatonbow's supposed to recruit. He's looking at the talent that makes sense for what he is trying to achieve as the offensive line coach instead of trying to achieve what the offensive coordinator wants him to achieve. So you recognize that in his evaluations now. Like, I mean, just looking at Tyler Guyton is a player that we would not have gotten if the last regime was still here. That's not a player you would have taken. And yeah, I'm saying it and it sounds absurd, right? Dude's already, he's slated to be a top 30 pick in the NFL draft. He's a first rounder. And I'm telling you right now, last regime, he would not be on this team, right? Because that's just how the evaluations were supposed to have been set. It's crazy now he gets to do his own thing, and we're seeing a lot of difference makers really pull up. The Eugene Brooks pickup from the last class, in which we're going to talk about that next. Let's dive into the last class that just came through. Who in there got you excited? Because for me, from Beatonbow, you've got Eugene Brooks, EPL, right? Isaiah Autry, who's going to be sneaky really good because he's literally out there in Mississippi. In the Mississippi-Alabama Challenge, his dad shot me some videos of him playing in that. And I'm just like, God, he's going up against some SEC talent. And he's playing.
Yeah.
The rankings don't feel right. But in this class coming in, give me a couple dudes, maybe 3, maybe 4, if you feel like it, that's got you excited going into spring practices on Monday.
I'll just say real quick, because I say it on every show or podcast appearance, like I'm a massive Reggie Powers fan. I have been for a very long time. Everyone knows that every time I make an appearance, I have to talk about Reggie Powers, so I'm sorry if you're already rolling your eyes. But I love this kid. I can't wait to watch him because of what he is. 24/7 was higher on him than anyone else in the industry, and for good reason.
Mm-hmm.
I think especially the fit within this defense, there is a very high ceiling there that this defensive staff can unlock at the end of the day. But I will shy away from more Reggie Powers talk to kind of go into some other options. I think you really do have to start with Eugene Brooks, right? Like, I think with Eugene, he is another prime example of a guy who he started out as a mid 3-star, if I remember correctly. Wasn't as hot. Like, Foj was an 89. That's saying, like, this dude's really, really good football player. Eugene was a mid 3. He was overweight. He was playing guard. Had some good offers. But then he lost, like, 60 pounds. Something crazy. Maybe it was up to 80 pounds. Completely reshaped his body. Moved to tackle out there in California from guard. Bettered himself as a pass protector at the tackle position. And mind you, he's playing left tackle, if I remember correctly, for Sierra Canyon. And then he goes out and furthers that momentum by dominating the camp circuit. And 24/7 ended up making him the number 73 overall player in America. I'll say that again because I think this stuff gets so overlooked. He's number 73 overall in America, which is mind-numbing when you consider the fact that he was a mid-3 before completely reshaping his body and transforming his game.
Yep.
He's arguably the most fascinating player in this class, and as it relates to playing time, we know what's going to happen over the next couple of months. That OU offensive line's in the spotlight in the spring, and Eugene Brooks is a huge part of that. Now, do I believe guys like Fabechi and Garion are more likely to start at guard? Sure, absolutely. Is Eugene Brooks someone who'd probably be one of the first people off the bench, especially at guard? I can't rule that out. So I think Eugene Brooks is fascinating to me going into this spring. The other one that I'm very excited about is Jaden Jackson. I'll tell you a quick story. People forget that Jaden Jackson was like seemingly impossible to get. Him and Eugene Brooks at one point were kind of felt like the Danny Okoye treatment where it's like, oh, he's not getting those kids. They're not even like being recruited by Oklahoma. Jaden Jackson was at one point seemingly like a foregone conclusion to Texas, Ohio State, Miami, so on and so forth. And then all of a sudden in the last second, Oklahoma pops up out of nowhere and closes this deal. Jaden Jackson, another one because you don't know how the rankings work, folks. You scream at me all the time. Started as a 3-star. But we get all this verified data and tape, and we bump him up to number 189 nationally. Why? Because he whooped everybody's ass his senior year. He continued to get better and better and better. And, like, he's also just an outstanding kid. And I don't know if you remember this, man. Like, he literally said he didn't want to take his OU visit. He didn't want to go. He didn't even want to take the unofficial. He was like, he literally had to be talked into giving OU a chance. And within the first 10 minutes of the visit that he didn't want to go on. That's what sealed the deal.
His mind.
Everything about Jaden Jackson that's already been talked about, we know, right? He's an elite interior defensive line presence who's going to get up above 300 pounds and is probably going to play a lot very soon. But my favorite story to tell about Jaden Jackson is when I went and drove out, if you'll remember, to the Lipscomb Academy versus IMG Academy game in Nashville, Tennessee. I drive all the way out there, and I'm going to talk to David Stone because Jaden Jackson by then had already committed. He was working on David. And the easy answer to your question would have been David Stone, right? Like, he's the 5-star, whatever. Here's what I love about Jaden Jackson among all the talent he has and whatever else. David and I were chopping it up after the game. And a story he told me, he was like, Lipscomb Academy, we were whooping them early on. And then all of a sudden, their offense settled in. And Lipscomb Academy has a lot of talent. At that time, they had Deuce Knight, who was a 4-star quarterback, just moved in, committed to Notre Dame. Well, Lipscomb Academy gets going on a drive. And David re-aggravates kind of one of those ankle injuries that had banged him up at times over the course of his career. He re-aggravates the ankle, but it's in the middle of an offensive drive. And Lipscomb's going, they're running hurry up, they're trying to keep IMG off guard. So David's getting to a point where it's like, it hurts. It hurts bad. And a play happens. IMG's running to get set back up. David's clearly, hampered by this injury. And Jaden grabs him and says, switch, and moves him forcibly over to the other side at defensive tackle. And David's like, what's going on? And the ball is snapped. They go. David comes back and he said, I realized in that moment, Jaden made me switch with him so that my get-off foot wasn't the ankle that was hurt.
Oh, dang. Okay. Situational awareness. Wow.
And I was like, for Jaden Jackson to think of that before the player who was hurt in the middle of a hurry-up drive, like, I'm a big Jaden Jackson fan now. He's all the talent in the world, but he's smart. And I think he's playing a lot next year. I really do. Like, just think about that for a second. Jaden Jackson saw his teammate in the middle of a hurry-up drive and said, switch with me so that your get-off foot isn't the ankle that's hurting you right now, and you can be the fullest extent of yourself. Then he had to worry about his assignment on the play and everything else he's got going on. I'm a big Jaden Jackson fan.
And having to switch what his assignment was because of where he's set. Now he's got to do what David was supposed to do, and David's got to, but recognizing, that's chef's kiss on the situational awareness. All right, we're going to wrap it up. Let you enjoy your day. Collin Kennedy, 247, Sooner Illustrated, the hardest working man in the industry and always on the road. Brent Venables had his presser Wednesday talking about, winter workouts in preparation for spring, which is, Monday, spring practices or whatnot. And we talked about some players, 24-karat highlight guys that jumped out to you. Of course, I am in the same boat. Reggie Powers is probably top of my list after watching his hit highlight. He made a highlight of just hitting people. Like, how do you have a highlight long enough to show you just leveling folks, right? That tells me everything I need to know about your mentality and what you're going to be bringing to this defense, right? Well, now we're going into the spring. BV talked about some of the transfer guys and some of the young guys coming in. As you mentioned, Jaden Jackson, 297 now. He said he's up to 297 and easily. If he's put on 20-something pounds coming in, so I think it's like 270-something coming in like, what's this, 2 months? Oh, yeah, they're going to have to that dude over 300, and he's going to be a comfortable 300 of good weight going into the season. You got him. Stone says he's up, so I'm guessing he's probably in the 280s with ease right now, right? Daniel Koye talking about he's like 250 something, right? I want to know. You think we can get Danny Okoye out there outdoing what Will Anderson did for Alabama or Dallas Turner? Because I feel like him and Jaden Jackson are probably the two underrated players in this class that we just don't recognize what they're probably about to do to other teams. Am I crazy?
Okoye is one who I'm terrified of setting the bar too high, but even when you're afraid, the bar that you could be setting still feels realistic. Does that make sense? Like,
Yep.
you're like, am I crazy to think that this kid who played homeschool ball could do what you just asked me? And it's like, when you first asked me the question, I'm like, and then I go, like I can.
It's the Alonzo Mourning meme of,
It's like,
yeah.
I think Danny could. Here's my thing with it. I don't know what it looks like this year, right? He's probably going to need a year. But I'm also in the same sense, like, does he? Like, it's going to be hard to carve him out a role considering what that edge room looks like. PJ, R. Mason Thomas, Ethan Downs, Caden Woolard, who sounds like Caden Woolard's been really solid in winter workouts to this point. How do you get him in there? I don't know, but you might have the issue forced type of thing. Yep. So it's great news to hear from Danny Okoye. And I really do think he's kind of on this path where he's carving himself out a role, whether people are ready for it or not.
Yeah, when he came on, right after committing or whatnot, and had him and Nigel Smith, which the picture of Nigel being by himself was, everyone's feelings was hurt. But I was just like, he did all his interviews before that, right? People already came up with him. People know what Nigel's going to be. He's a quiet guy, and that's the best part about how talented he is. He's going to be one of those quiet storms that come through and just beat people's tails. But Danny came on and told us why he played football. He's like, he just enjoys the violence of it. And I'm just like, oh, okay, so you're going to be a terrorist on the football field is what you're telling me, right? You're going to go out there and really cause problems. You enjoy the violence of football? Like, you, enjoy hitting people? I just like, what in his deep voice, his deep Barry White voice, talking about how much he just loves hitting people. And that told me at that point. And so that's why I had to ask you that in that way, because watching Will Anderson and how he was leveraged at Alabama, I had to talk to a few people about that in my Discord, and we were talking about how Bama used him more of a jack, just to go out there and terrorize quarterbacks. We don't care. We don't really put you in coverage. Go out there, Micah Parsons style, and just cause problems. That's it. It feels like that's something he would enjoy. Like, he would flourish in it only because he would love doing it so much. Like, he wouldn't feel like he's missing out on anything if all he's getting to do is terrorize people on one side of the ball. And that's what jumped out to me. And so you had him transfer, Caden Woolard, heard great things about him. BV mentioned him as well. Deion Burks.
Yeah.
I watched his video that he put out on TikTok from, I'm guessing this was spring workouts when he was at Purdue. The dude's throwing the ball at the competition in workouts, right? He's catching it on them. He's getting up and he's just throwing it at their face. And I'm just like, oh, you just hateful. Can that man go out there, because he said he wants to be like Drake Stoops did last year, get in the slot and just be open all the time? Do you see that out of him coming to here from Purdue? Because honestly, I've watched his route running. I think that they can get him close to that point. How you feel about Burks?
I'm not alone. Like, I've talked to people who I trust their scouting opinion as well. I'm not alone in thinking this is an NFL player that Oklahoma got out of the transfer portal. Like, I really do firmly believe that, as crazy as it sounds, he probably would have been someone who made some sense in the NFL draft. And if he went somewhere where he was like the unquestioned number one target, he's probably playing himself into a day 2 early, day 3 selection. I don't know exactly how this is all going to work with this receiver room, right?
Oh gosh. Yes.
I don't know exactly what the plan is. But Deion Burks, to me, has a chance to be one of, if not the best receiver on OU's roster going into next year. And that's saying something with Andrell Anthony and Nick Anderson. But I believe that someone like Deion Burks, who he is in that specific role, gives you basically a Sunday caliber player in a high volume role within your offense. And that's a problem. for people. Like, that's a problem. And so I love Deion Burks, man. I was a huge proponent of his when he was in the portal. I mean, again, considered one of, if not the best available receiver in the transfer portal for a reason. This guy to me is someone like, if you put out, let's say, 3 receiver set, Nick Anderson, Andrew Anthony, Deion Burks, what are you gonna do? You know, who you doubling? You think it's gonna work for very long? So I'm a big Deion Burks fan, man. I'm really excited to see what he can do.
Yeah, watching him lose his mind like that made me say, yeah, he's going to be the aggressive wide receiver we need, and he's going to find ways to get open and just he's going to wreck. This is probably going into the SEC, and we'll talk about this. I think we'll definitely get you back on after spring game, better evaluation of what people look like, and we can really talk about what Oklahoma's place is in the SEC because, yeah, everything right now is, we're just projecting and trying to figure out what it looks like. We can say that it's going to be great. The only thing that I really give Oklahoma advantage at is that we're walking in with the most returning production of anybody in the SEC with a defensive coach who has always focused on defense. And we watched him completely refresh this team from the old regime. And that is huge to me that he is now roughly at 95% his guys in how large these classes he's taking. And so let's wrap that up with this. We're seeing the classes that he's taken are bigger, but it's anticipated that this class will not be as big as the last 2. How impressed have you been with what Venables has done in getting the players he needs in order to bring success into the SEC?
Yeah, I think you'd be a fool to say they're not recruiting at a high level, right? I mean, consistently in the top 10 and the top 8, hovering near the top 5. Obviously, this 2025 class right now is at number 5 overall in the very early rankings with 10 commits. I think this 2024 cycle was one that OU can really hang its hat on. That staff did what it needed to do, right? Even with some misses along the way, they got the defensive line talent that needed to be acquired. They added some quality pieces for the offensive line of scrimmage. Skill players, check. Number 1 running back in the country, barely even talked about. They went and brought him in for the SEC. I think that what they're doing relative to not only recruiting in general, but addressing the premium positions is really impressive. And it's another thing to do that and have that checked off, but then to continue that into further classes. And whether it's this 2025 class right now or this visitor list that you're looking at for this weekend, full of elite offensive and defensive line talents in 2026. If you're not recruiting these kids now, no matter what class they are, you're already behind. And I think what Oklahoma is doing, not only getting the guys, but doing the due diligence ahead of time to be out in front of these recruitments to try and close later on, it's incredibly important. And especially at a time where there are SEC caliber players at those premium positions that we talk about in your region, those efforts do not go unnoticed long term when you're getting offensive and defensive linemen, corners, linebackers, what have you. And so I think it's been wildly impressive. It's a big reason why I'm visiting all these schools right now, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not going there and looking at anything extravagant, folks. Like, I'm watching these kids lift weights most of the time. But I'm out there in winter workouts for these high school programs because OU has been recruiting a lot of these young players well before their recruitments are in the spotlight. And so out of all of these school visits, you always hear about what Oklahoma is doing to be in their recruitments. And I think, again, that's why they're able to not only be in all these premier recruitments that have helped them establish themselves within the future of the SEC, but they're landing guys that are going to help them at the places you need help at to have success in that league.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. So, all right, we're going to wrap it up. Collin, thank you again for pulling up, dropping the knowledge from all the journeys that you've been doing. I know that it's going to be a crazy March and April. We'll get you back in once you actually can settle at home and not have the wife as upset because you've been gone so long. But man, I appreciate you as usual. Thanks for joining us.
Always fun. Looking forward to it next. Remember, folks, if you're out there, great time to subscribe to SoonersIllustrated.com. Rumor has it there might be a VIP sub deal coming up here pretty soon for spring ball. So I encourage you to hop over to the site and join us. It's a great board. Jay is on it as well, and we have a lot of fun talking about all this stuff and a whole lot more.
Link is in the description below. We've always got promos. Keep an eye open. We'll definitely we'll be pushing for that. So check out Sooner Illustrated. Like I said, the link is in the description below.